Hey there, and welcome to the Catching Up with Casey show, where we talk about anything and everything that has to do with building cohesive, vision-driven teams. I am Casey Watts, school impact strategist and the host of this show. Now, if you are here, then you inevitably are an instructional leader who wants to make change happen, even when change seems impossible. And you can do that if you have cohesive, vision-driven teams that have done clarity work. They know exactly where they're headed and how they're going to get there. These teams have done identity work, and they've built their self and social awareness skills. And they have done collaboration work, and they know how to move beyond faux collaboration to get to true collaboration where change happens and where people get on board. I'm so excited to bring to you conversations that help you to do exactly that. The work that needs to be done to build cohesive, vision-driven teams. Now, with all of that said, let's dive into today's conversation. Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to, I think this is actually episode 88, I believe. I'm pretty sure this is episode 88. And we are talking all about the art of asking for feedback. Now, there is a flip side to this, and it is the art of receiving feedback, which we probably won't quite get to, but I really want to talk about the art of asking for feedback. Now, I would love to know who's here tonight. If you hop in live, add a comment. If you're catching the replay on YouTube or LinkedIn, add a comment. Let me know what's on your mind about feedback. What are you wondering? Pop that into the comments and I can address it here, or I can have a private conversation with you via any social media messaging system or email. So last week, I noticed that I had this kind of awkward moment with a staff member who I was in her classroom just for a split second, right? Like I wasn't in there for a long time. Maybe it was more than a split second, but I wasn't in there for a long time. And I was focused on a very specific task. I was like gathering books and materials. I was thinking about organization. So I wasn't really paying attention to the teaching, but I kind of knew what was going on, right? But I wasn't paying super close attention to the teaching. And I noticed that I fell victim to this awkward moment simply because most of us have never really been taught how to appropriately ask for feedback, right? And so this is what she said to me. After the fact, we were meeting about something different entirely. And she said, "So you were in the classroom. How do you think it was good? Do you think it was good, or how did it go?" Here's what's happening in those moments. Now, you're probably you've experienced some of those situations where you've been caught off guard. Someone asks a simple question like that. It's very vague. And you're left wondering how to respond because either you really weren't paying attention enough to be able to provide feedback, or there's something else that you want to say, but you don't quite know how to say it in the moment. We're setting people up to give us phony feedback that really doesn't help when we ask these super vague questions, right? And we're also setting ourselves up to not be able to implement anything that's impactful from the feedback that we get. So I want to talk tonight about what happens when we ask for feedback in the wrong way. And I will also want to talk about how we can set ourselves up differently and how we can teach this and should teach this to other people. So here's what happens when we ask for feedback in the wrong way. A person will vaguely answer, like they're going to respond very vaguely, right? So we might say something like, "Oh, it was good." We might even say it was great. Or we might say, "Yeah, it was okay. You might think about this next time," right? So it's super vague. and it doesn't allow for someone to make any significant changes in whatever it is that they're focused on. So when I'm talking to you about feedback tonight, let me just back up. When I'm talking to you about feedback, a lot of you are instructional leaders coming to this thinking about how do you give feedback to teachers, or as instructional leaders, how do you ask for feedback from other people? As an instructional leader, I ask for feedback very specifically and for lots of different reasons. But this really applies to a wide variety of things. So I might give examples tonight about the kind of feedback that I ask for about my writing or my keynotes, or I might ask for feedback about a meeting that I led or a professional development session. So you ask for feedback for lots of different things. What I'm sharing with you tonight applies to all of those things, right? So we want to be sure that we teach people how to ask for feedback so that in schools we avoid those awkward moments and we have actually productive conversations that help build capacity. And we also want to be sure that we know how to ask for feedback appropriately so we can grow and change as leaders, right? So, what happens when we ask for feedback the wrong way? In other words, what happens when we say, was it good? How was that? Did you like it? What did you think? Too vague. And so we get a vague response. It was good. That was great. You did this. I noticed that, right? Too vague. And so we're not making any growth or progress. Another thing that can happen is when someone asks you for feedback, and they do it the wrong way, we can skirt providing feedback by asking something like, oh, well, how did you think it went? Right? That's us skirting the feedback. Or, I wasn't really paying attention, so I can't really give you feedback. So that's skirting the feedback. Or we might find ourselves flat out lying, right? You've probably been in that moment when the words that come out of your mouth don't match what you actually believe about what you noticed happening. So, for example, it could be an email that someone has sent. And after the fact, they're probably like, hey, how was that email? Do you think that email was good? Well, if I don't think it was good and it's just become awkward because they're asking me, did you think it was good? I'm trying to find an out. And so my out is, it was good, even though I don't believe that. But the problem is that the person asking me for feedback has kind of set me up to fail in the way that I provide the feedback because it's too vague and too broad. It's not specific enough. And we're going to talk tonight about how we can get really specific. Now, feedback can be absolutely powerful if we're setting ourselves up and we're setting others up for feedback that matters, right? We want to be able to set ourselves up. If we are asking for feedback, we want to be able to set ourselves up to receive feedback that's going to allow us to apply or implement the feedback. And we want to set up the people who we're asking for feedback to be able to provide that kind of specific feedback that's super productive and helpful. Almost always, when we don't provide and or receive productive feedback, there's something that's missing. And you guys hear me say this all the time. That thing that is missing is clarity. Clarity is almost always the thing that is missing when we aren't having productive conversations surrounding feedback. And so, what are we going to practice to make sure that we ourselves are practicing the art of asking for feedback, and in turn, we're teaching our staff how to ask for feedback? Let me tell you what. This should absolutely be done in your PLCs. This should absolutely be talked about in teams. This should be talked about with your instructional leadership team. This should be taught at the beginning of the school year during in-service. Why? Because we have a whole year with people who are going to be asking us how things went. We find our identity, especially teachers, we find our identity in teaching, right? And so when we ask for feedback, especially when we don't feel great about how something has gone, and we ask for feedback and we receive something super vague like it was good, there's no validation in that. And it can feel defeating. Even if someone says it was good or it was great, that's not enough validation, right? So we want to move beyond that. But we have grown up not being taught how to do this thing that I'm teaching you tonight. We've grown up that way. I think about there's a book called, now it's either called Choice Words. There are two different books. One of them is titled Choice Words. I think it's by Peter Johnston. And another is The Power of Our Words. And in one of those two books, they talk, I think it's The Power of Our Words. They talk a lot, the authors talk a lot about how we obviously choose our words to converse with students. One of the things they specifically talk about is feedback to students and praise for students. And we have a tendency as adults, because this is what our system was and what we grew up with. So we're just kind of regurgitating our own experiences, but we have heard things, blanket statements like, good job, that's great. Think about when a kid has asked you, do you like my picture? We all say, I love your picture, right? Whether we actually do or not is a different story. And so in that book, they talk about the power of our words in shifting the validation. So instead of getting validation from us for everything that they're doing, they're able to self-validate. And this is very similar. Asking for and providing feedback is a way to self-validate and also grow as a professional and as a person, really, too, because there are so many areas of life where we ask for feedback, and sometimes I think we don't even know that we're asking for feedback when we have those really brief questions like, do you think it's good? And we want validation from other people. But I think the key to true professional growth and personal growth is learning how to self-validate. And part of that is asking for specific feedback. So here are the things that I'm going to ask you as an instructional leader to practice first, and also then teach other people. So for example, I'm working with some brand new teachers this year. And one of the things that we are working on specifically is how to ask for feedback after I've come in and done an observation. So these are the three things that I'm going to be telling them and teaching them. The number one, I've already said it, is be specific. Know what you want to know and be sure you're allowing for reinforcing responses. So what do I mean by that? Be specific. Know what it is you want to know. So before, if you know that someone is coming in, or you know you're going to ask them, how was it? Your gut reaction is to say, how was it? Or what do you think? Do you think it was good? I did it myself just Friday. I was talking with my coaching partner, and she's really just a coach of mine. She coaches me through lots of different things. So my own coach, I was talking to her about an upcoming keynote. I took her through the different components of the keynote. And at the end, I said, you think that's good? And I caught myself and I said, wait a minute, hold on. Because her response was, yeah, it's good. Well, what else is she supposed to say? Right? Plus, oh my gosh, think about this. She is someone that I trust and someone that I'm fairly close to. We have had very real conversations, and we push back on each other so we can say just about anything to each other, including providing constructive criticisms. So yeah, I trusted her enough to say to me, you need to think about this part. But I wasn't really setting her up to be able to provide that kind of feedback. Instead, I was setting her up to say, yeah, it's good. So if I'm specific instead, then I know what I want to know going into it. So for example, before asking her, do you think it's good? I'm going to pause for a minute and I'm going to think, what is it I really want to know? Like, what do I really want to know from this person? Am I coming to this person because I just want them to tell me that it's good? Or do I really want feedback? Because if I want them to tell me that it's good, then fine. Go ahead and ask the vague question, but know that you're stifling your own personal and professional growth. Instead, I want to think, what is it that I want to know? And so I've thought about it for just a second, and this is my example for you guys. I asked her a very specific question. Okay, think about my keynote and the slides that I've shown you. What is it within this keynote that still lacks clarity? Because I was asking her that very specific question that I really wanted to know more about, she said, actually, go back to these slides. I'm still unclear about what it is that you're trying to get across here. Guys, I ended up taking out those slides completely. Not because she said that, but because I realized after talking through it, like, yeah, maybe that's not really hitting home. So I took those out and replaced them. And what we put in instead is so much better, so much clearer. So be specific, know what it is you want to know before you ask for the feedback. Pause before you say, was it good? Did you like it? Before you ask those limiting questions. And then be sure you're allowing for reinforcing responses. Everybody needs that. It's just human nature. You want to feel validated, and you really want validation from other people because we haven't really been taught to self-validate. So I'm going to encourage you, when you are being specific about feedback or about the feedback that you want, be sure to ask questions that allow for reinforcement. So what I sometimes have said to the people who are reviewing my book, I give them like 4 very specific questions. The first question I say is, point out as you're reading which lines are quotable from this book or from this chapter. So that's validation for me immediately. Like, they're going to say, this is quotable. This is great stuff. In other words, is what I feel like they're saying. Another thing that I ask for is, tell me about a place that you really were super engaged or highly motivated. So 2 things that are validating to me, right? So I'm getting some reinforcing responses. And then the other 2 things I'm asking are, what is a specific place where you found yourself confused or that it was lacking clarity? And then tell me, I'm really working on stories in my writing. And so I've asked, tell me about a place where I need to input another story or where coming back to the story would be beneficial. Okay, so I'm seeing lots of people in the comments. Hey, Rosalie. Hey, Elizabeth. That's awesome. I'm glad you guys are here. So number 1, be specific, know what you want to know, and be sure you're allowing for reinforcing responses. And that's what you're going to teach your people too. The second thing is to listen, to learn, and understand without justifying, unless asked. So what I mean by that is, once you ask for feedback, you are only listening to learn and understand, especially if you're asking for feedback that might feel like constructive criticism. Be ready to take it in and handle it. You're just listening to learn and understand. You're not listening to justify why you did something that you did unless they ask about it. So my coworker, Jerry, I hope you're okay, Jerry, with me mentioning your name because I've just done it like 2 or 3 times now. But she will ask me questions that cause me to justify. So she's looking for me to justify why I did something. But if she's not asking that question, I'm not justifying. I'm just taking it in. Now, I might ask probing questions so I understand the feedback. So for example, if I have asked her, tell me about a place in this keynote that is confusing or that I need to clarify more, when she says, this part I'm not quite sure about, then I can ask probing questions. I can ask, tell me more about that. Or I can probe further and say, tell me about what you feel like would make it clearer, or what exactly is unclear about it. So I'm giving her ways to provide additional feedback that's even more specific, but I'm not trying to justify something that is close to my heart, right? So you're listening to understand, or listening to learn and understand, trying not to justify unless you're asked to justify. This, again, is something you want to teach people. Think about the number of times that you have provided sometimes unsolicited feedback from people or to people, and immediately they want to start to go into justification, right? This is true for a lot of classroom teachers. Again, they hold tightly to their identity as a classroom teacher, and when receiving feedback, sometimes they feel like it's an attack on their identity, which is another reason we need to shift mindsets about feedback. And so we have to teach people about this and definitely model it. And then finally, you obviously want to say thank you. Now, you can go on about this. You can extend this and say what exactly it is you're thankful for. You can say, thank you. This is what you've given me to think about, and here are next steps. Or, thank you. Can you come in again and tell me more about this? Or, thank you. I'm going to rework this email and I'm going to show it to you again. So just giving a thank you will not only validate the time that you and this person have spent together conversing about feedback, but you're validating them as well. And they deserve to be validated for spending their time and effort providing you feedback that's helpful. So here's what we can do when we receive feedback requests that are not specific, okay? So let's say, and let me go back real quick. So number 1, be specific, know what you want to know. Number 2, listen to learn and understand. Number 3, say thank you. And I told you, model it, model it, model it, model it. If you are teaching your staff about this, you're going to tell them, I'm going to come to you and ask for feedback. I'm modeling for you how, like, this process, but I'm also practicing myself. Wow. Think about how much that can do for building trust on your campus. Think about what that can do for the culture of your school. Think about what that can do when your teachers have started practicing this and they're going into other classrooms for learning walks, or they're going into other classrooms for peer observations, and they're able to do this same thing with their colleagues. It could be amazing. Now, let's talk about when you get requests for feedback that are not specific. Here's what you can do. You can smile and you can say these things. So I'm assuming a staff member's coming up to you, a colleague, a friend's coming up to you, and they say, how was it? Did you like it? Was it good? What did you think? Smile. And here are some things you can say. You can say, tell me some or 2 things you'd like to know or hear about. So don't read this as tell me some 2 things. That doesn't make sense. But tell me some or tell me 2 things you'd like to know or hear about. So they have to, you're kind of placing it back on the person that's asking for feedback, and they're really trying to decide, okay, do I know what it is I want to know? Right? And then once they share, here's what I want to know about. Then you can share what feedback you have based on those very specific things. Or you can even say, you know what, let's talk about this later, which leads me to my next point. The next thing that you could say is, I'd love to have a conversation with you about this. Let's set up a time to meet so we can chat about it. In the meantime, because you want them thinking about specifically what they want to know, in the meantime, think about 2 specific things you want feedback on. You're setting them up for success. You're setting yourself up for success in providing feedback. You also can say, I'm happy to provide feedback or coach you, but it really helps me to know what you want to focus on, right? Don't jump in and give a quick, it was great. These are things you have to practice. Have one in your pocket that you know you're going to respond with when someone says something like, was it good? Did you like it? How did it go? What did you think? You finally can say what's on your mind about. So I'm going to go back to Keynote, and I have shown my coaching partner my Keynote slides, and I get to the end and I said to her, do you think that's good? What she could have responded to me with is, what's on your mind about blank? So what's on your mind about these slides? Or what's on your mind? Like, if she's thinking about something she wants to dive further into, she could say, well, what's on your mind about this one area? Or what's on your mind about the audience? It could be anything. An email, same thing. If you're asking for feedback about an email or getting asked about an email that someone wants to send out, you can say, well, tell me what's on your mind about the email. This question is a brain opening question and will unleash all kinds of thoughts that people have that maybe they unconsciously have, that they didn't know that they had before. Okay, so those are some things you can ask when you say to people, respond when you get asked that awkward question of, what did you think? How was it? Or it's just something super vague. Okay, so I'm always open to questions and answers, or a question and answer session. If you have questions about feedback, definitely put it in the comments, but know that I'm available to you in all of the different platforms, social media, email, reach out to me. Here's what I'm going to suggest that you do. Number one, take time to practice this yourself. So think tonight about what it is you're going to ask for feedback on in the near future. It could be something you want to ask for feedback on tomorrow. It could be in the next couple of days. It could be next week. Decide on something that you know you're going to be asking for feedback around. Now, it could be, I'm going to give you a whole list of things. If you're a classroom teacher, or you're going into a classroom to model teaching, which I know a lot of people who listen to this are doing that, instead of asking, how was it? Think about what kinds of questions you are going to ask. What is it that you really want to know? If you are a campus leader, a principal, or an assistant principal, think about something that's coming up. It could be a hard conversation that you know an assistant principal or principal is going to be. You're going to have a buddy in there with you having this crucial conversation with someone else. You can ask for feedback about that. A parent meeting, ask for feedback. Professional development session, ask for feedback. An email that you need to send out to a group of people or to the whole school, ask for feedback, but practice these things, okay? So just to recap one last time, especially for those of you who are just listening on the podcast, be specific, know what you want to know before asking for feedback. Listen to learn and understand, and then finally say thank you so you can validate the person that's providing you feedback, and also have something that you're taking away from that feedback conversation. Okay, guys, if you have not yet subscribed to my email, to my newsletter each week, you're going to want to do that, because last week in my newsletter, I sent out an actual Canva presentation that you can implement with instructional leaders on your campus that talks all about providing effective feedback. I also would love to come and work with your campus, work with your instructional leadership team, your coaches, or your teachers to teach more about and train your people how to provide effective feedback and how to ask for feedback that makes it meaningful. Okay, I'd love to know what was most useful for you in this session. Guys, head on over to the website. You're going to see the recap of this in the next couple of days, catchingupwithkc.com / or maybe /show, and it'll take you there. All right, until next time, I'll catch you later. You guys go off and practice providing or asking for great feedback. All right, bye. Hey there, thanks for joining this episode. I would love for you to do me 3 solid favors before you head out. Number 1, subscribe to this show. I've got a lot of great guests and content coming up, and I don't want you to miss any of it. Number 2, share this show. Share it with your like-minded colleagues and friends and those leaders who are eager to build cohesive, vision-driven teams. And finally, connect with me on all the social media platforms. You can find me at Catch Up with KC on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Until next time, go off and create teams that leave people feeling inspired, empowered, and eager for more each day.